If you have ever lived in another country different from your country of origin as an adult, you will agree with me that house hunting is literally one of the most stressful elements of moving to another country. Is it when your budget starts to look like a joke when you get to know the actual market prices? Or when you look and look and you cannot even find the kind of apartment or house that you're looking for? Or when they ask you to bring all sorts of documents, contracts, references from previous landlords in the same country when you haven't even lived there before? Or the absolute worst, we do not rent to foreigners. Side eye. I'm not about to stress you further. However, I think that there's one criteria that you need to add to your house hunting if you are an immigrant, an expat, or anyone who's moving to live in another country different from your country of origin. Why? Stick with me and you'll find out. If you're here for the first time, welcome. I remain Ola, your DEI bestie. And of course, we keep it real on this channel, exploring all things diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it is my hope that you always leave every video on this channel with some more inspiration to co-create a more inclusive and equitable world. For my OGs and returning subscribers, thank you for always stopping by. I appreciate your support and your continued presence on this channel. To the topic of the day. The first reason why I think you should be looking for a house or an apartment in a diverse neighborhood is that you need to get a soft landing. See, immigration is already stressful. Moving to another country where you don't know anyone, where you might not even have any roots whatsoever, is stressful enough. Moving to a diverse neighborhood ensures that you get a softer landing. The feeling of loneliness, the feeling of isolation is less when you look around you and you see people who look like you, people who have something in common with you, as opposed to a more homogenous neighborhood where you really don't think you have anything in common with anyone. Trust me, it does a lot to your psychology and just your state of being and belonging when you look around and see different kinds of people who are probably navigating immigration or moving to another country just like you. And that really helps. It really does help to improve your feeling of safety and your feeling of belonging. When my family first moved to the Netherlands, the apartment that we were able to get, because we literally just took what we could get, it was in Utrecht in a very homogeneous neighborhood. And I mean, I think that was fine for us as adults. But then my daughter started to go to daycare, and in a daycare of around 60 kids, she was the only black kid. And it was very weird for me because on one level, I couldn't relate with any of the parents because we didn't speak the same language. At that time, my Dutch was very terrible. I could not even greet in Dutch because, of course, we were just coming to the Netherlands. And it was just really awkward. I started to feel very concerned and very conscious of how my daughter was feeling in that daycare. She was very young at the time, around 2 years old, so she probably wasn't very aware of her identity as a Nigerian and as an African child. However, I was wondering how being the only black kid in that daycare affected the level of care that she received, because you know there's unconscious bias. There's a tendency to otherize people when they're the minority in a particular environment. And so I was always at alert. I was always very, very close to the daycare to try to ensure that my daughter was receiving the maximum care possible. And of course, that was when me and my husband decided, this is one more reason for us to look at moving to another city. So it really does help. It really does help to move to a neighborhood where you have a lot of diverse individuals. Another reason why, as an immigrant, you need to be looking at houses in diverse areas is that diverse areas tend to have more inclusive communities. So from the non-profits, churches, mosques, and other religious communities who are supportive of people from diverse backgrounds, who are looking out to ensure that newcomers and, people who are just getting familiar with their environment settle in and integrate well. The language classes for countries where the major language of interaction is not the same as yours. It is really, really important to be around these neighborhoods, because this is where all of this kind of inclusive communities and inclusive facilities are concentrated. It really helps to be in such neighborhoods so that you can get quicker information about integrating. You can turn to communities of people that look like you. For instance, if you're Asian, if you're Black, if you're African, you can get to see pockets of communities of people that look like you. And these communities tend to embrace you even more because they understand what you're going through as someone who's living in that country or that city for the first time. They can give you hacks, they can give you tips to do things better. They can give you access to information and access to opportunities, really, because they understand where you are and the process you're going through, the process of integration you're going through. Who better to understand the process that you're going through than someone who has gone through it themselves? So yeah, this is something that I found. It's really helpful to be in a diverse community so that you can be close to these communities, you can join some of these communities, and you can feel an increased sense of belonging. Again, it is really strategic for you as a foreigner and an international to live in a more diverse neighborhood, because that is where you have a higher likelihood of meeting your cultural needs. When we moved to Rotterdam, when my family moved to Rotterdam after living in Utrecht for a few months, I was so pleased to find that we were living 3 to 4 minutes walk away from an African store. And so I could just stroll in, in 3 minutes or 4 minutes, I had access to my yams, my okra, my goat meat, shaki, body, cow leg. I could buy all what I needed, fresh fish. I could buy all what I needed in an African store very close to us. And why was that? We were living in the heart of Rotterdam South. And Rotterdam South is one of the most diverse neighborhoods in the entire country, in the whole of the Netherlands. So of course, those stores were strategically located in such areas because that is where you have a higher concentration of people who need those food items, like the African food items, the core African food items. And it was just really easy to access, and the prices were quite affordable compared to where I was coming from, the more homogeneous neighborhood in Utrecht. And that was a source of comfort, whenever we needed to make comfort food or even just throwing in quick lunch that reminds you of home, as opposed to a more homogeneous neighborhood. Another reason to consider gravitating towards a more diverse and heterogeneous neighborhood when you're moving to a country for the first time, especially, is that the cost of living in diverse and more heterogeneous neighborhoods tends to be lower. And this includes cost of housing. Now, there is a discriminatory and racist edge to this, because you tend to find locals moving away from the areas that have a concentration of immigrants and the very diverse neighborhood, because they describe it as ghetto, rough, unsafe. To be honest, when you really look at the data, when you compare the crime rates between the different areas in the same country, the difference is usually marginal. So you find that it's more of an agenda and sensationalism and overgeneralization, that the areas that are diverse are not really safe, right? But as an immigrant, you can use that to your advantage. Immigration is very expensive. We know that. You tend to cover a lot of costs out of pocket, from your visa costs to flights, settling in your family and all of that. And so it helps, at least in the beginning, to have accommodation that is very affordable, to have access to housing that is not too expensive compared to your national average where you are. So yes, look into those diverse neighborhoods, the neighborhoods that have a lot of immigrants, that have a lot of people who might not necessarily be locals. It usually is cheaper, in such areas. Another reason as an immigrant to move to a more diverse neighborhood is for exposure for your children. And this is particularly for people who are moving to another country with their families, with their children, with their child or children. It really does help to have your children surrounded by diverse individuals, people who look differently from them, who speak different languages. And the reason is that in today's world, we see that our root causes of exclusion, discrimination, racism, all the isms is that people were not consciously taught about the value of diversity and belonging. It was not intentionally drilled into a lot of people as children why we should value difference, why we should embrace each other and coexist peacefully regardless of our differences. And so living in a diverse neighborhood helps your children understand different cultures. They see, they live, they breathe diversity, and they tend to grow up in the midst of different cultures, different value systems. They tend to understand and appreciate that difference and even form their own values for themselves, really. This is a really big life skill that is valuable for them, even way into adulthood. It can really, really set them up for success when they understand this and they've grown outside the bubble of people who look and think like them. It's really valuable and very good exposure for your children to grow up in a diverse neighborhood. But I'm really curious, what do you think about immigrants living in heterogeneous neighborhoods? Do you agree with me that it helps for you to live in a neighborhood that is really diverse, not too homogeneous? Or do you disagree? Do you think that immigrants should really be moving towards more homogeneous areas? What has been your experience? Is diversity a key criteria for you in house hunting? Whether you're buying, you're renting, have you considered diversity as a main criteria? Please let me know in the comment section below. It would be really, really great to hear from you. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video. I have enjoyed speaking to you as always. See you in the next one.